I don't know quite what the correct word is to describe my feelings about having you in the studio, Kate. You're always very welcome, but obviously I wish that the circumstances that bring you here today were not unfolding. We saw at the weekend that your husband Derek, who has been in a coma for weeks after contracting COVID-19, the optimistic reports, I think, were perhaps a little bit too optimistic.
Well, I think there's technical stuff, isn't there? So a coma is, I now know, these are the things that you learn that you didn't know before.
Yes.
But, we think of a coma like in the movies where somebody is not moving and in essentially a vegetative state. That's the correct term. And so you could stab them with a knife and they wouldn't move. But there's actually various different states of consciousness that come into it. And what Derek's in is a minimum state of consciousness. So he is opening his eyes, which feels like a breakthrough moment because you suddenly look into someone's eyes. But then it's become apparent that actually from there, we still don't know whether he can emerge any further. So obviously we're hoping he can, but it's weeks, it's months, it's potentially years for the recovery.
Presumably that is the hardest thing of all to deal with, is the absolute absence of any hook to hang your hopes on.
I know what you mean, but I think the hardest thing to deal with would be the loss of life. So I'm very grateful.
So as long as hope sustains.
Exactly. And I'm very grateful because so many people have lost loved ones that I'm very grateful that he's still here. There is still hope. There's still a chance. There's still things to work for. And there is some bits of progress. His kidneys look like they're starting to recover and other things are. So there is hope. But yeah, you're right. We're in an extraordinary situation with COVID and with the pandemic generally, aren't we? Where we are in a world of unknown. Already, some of the things they've learnt because of the way it's affected Derek have changed the way they're looking at other patients who get it. And it's almost a daily learning from the medical profession. And when they say, we don't know if he can recover, but we can't rule out that he can recover, it sounds like you're trapped in a strange and terrifying series of double negatives.
Yes, of course.
But actually, they're telling the truth. That is the situation, and only time will tell.
We don't really expect doctors to give us 50-50s, do we? Or to give us, not sure, unknowns. We naively and wrongly, and I know some doctors find it quite difficult to navigate. We do expect them to provide us with certainties.
Yes. Well, they always say, apparently, when you start to train to be a doctor, never say always and never say never.
There you go.
Because the world can surprise you. You can say, this always happens and this never happens. And the human body does incredible things for the good and sometimes sadly. But I think it's sort of symptomatic of what we're all going through, which is the people that you trust in a crisis, whether it be my children that you were talking about, me, and their dad, or politicians or doctors, are facing a situation which is, it's the word of the times, isn't it? Unprecedented.
Yes.
And they're human. I mean, I've been contacted by so many politicians of all parties, sort of humanly reaching out, and you can see that they're struggling with things. The doctors are fighting with, sometimes 30 or 40 years of medical experience to bring to bear with a virus that is just behaving in a way that's very unpredictable.
It's also, as you speak, a reminder of how even the word COVID means different things in almost every household. I mean, for good or for ill, I think it was inevitable because your experiences bear no resemblance whatsoever to the experiences of many people who have had it. So, well,
I've had it.
Yes.
And my experience was, I had it as Derek was going into hospital a few days later. And it was a bad case of flu, and I think there was one day for me where I thought, God, if this gets any worse, we're going to be in trouble because there's the two of us involved. But it was nothing like this. And Derek, when he went into hospital, didn't have a cough and didn't have a temperature, which back in March was the thing we were all told to look out for as a symptom. And actually, he had different symptoms, which we're learning also have devastating consequences.
And you've seen at first hand the NHS stepping up in ways that presumably leave you reeling.
I mean, they're just extraordinary. There was one point, which we've moved away from a little bit now, thankfully, where, Derek was having essentially an artificial lung. There was blood coming out of one leg and going back into another, and oxygen was being put in. His liver was having full support. His kidneys were having full support. His heart was having full support. All these bits of kit were in operation, all requiring different things. So one thing needed anticoagulants, another needed other things. And they are, at a technical level, just balancing something that's so extraordinary. I just thought, these are people, they're all younger than me as well, half of them. A lot of people are these days, Jane. I'm just, and you're on the phone because obviously you can't visit, but you think, wow, you are extraordinary. But it's not just that, it's the nurses, it's the porters, it's the people that they assign to answer the calls who are just extraordinary individuals in how they're doing it, all working, 3 times the shifts they should be, and frightening conditions, and doing wonderful things, and still able to learn and treat each patient with the same degree of commitment.
But yes, that's a good point, that everybody gets the same treatment from the NHS.
Really
but of course, not everybody gets the same treatment outside of the NHS. And I wonder whether, because you mentioned all of the support and all of the warmth that you've received personally, but is this one of those times where life might be easier if you weren't a public figure?
I don't know about that, actually. I don't know about that. I mean, apparently there was a picture of me in plastic garden clogs. Well, I was doing a clap for carers.
They'll be sold out by Sunday, Kate.
Which my friend said, listen, I know you're not thinking about the fact there might be photographers around, but is there any chance you can? I was like, oh my God, that was awful. And I probably haven't shaved my legs for months. So there are moments where you probably, but also you don't give a damn about anything like that, do you, at that point? So I don't mind. And the plus side is that there's a feeling of, there's a terrible feeling of isolation when the person you love most in the world and the person that you would call first or ask first for help is the person that's in trouble. And having messages from people saying, I'm going through this, I'm thinking of you, and sticking together, I think is a wonderful thing that a lot of people don't have. And, the doctors are saying now that I've got to get on, and I'm very keen to, provide a safe emotionally as well as practically. As in the short term, a bit of a single mum, get back on with work and get them focus on their schooling and all those things and get them back into life as we're all having to. So that's one of the lovely things that hopefully I can share that, and hopefully when I get back onto Smooth, your sister station.
Yes, indeed.
We can have that, yeah.
And that is what the doctors have told you to do because of the thing we began this conversation with, which is the uncertainty of the length of the tunnel, or even, of course, what's
we
out the
don't
end
know
of
the
it.
destination. We don't know how long it's going to be. You have to take everything a day at a time and hope for progress. And also... I keep saying to him, so I FaceTime him because we're trying to give him familiar voices and sounds and music he loves. So I've got an iPad in there which I can talk to him through.
Have you not been to the bedside at all?
It's a very difficult
I know
situation.
it is. I just obviously any question I ask you, you're more than welcome to.
No. I mean, I'm hoping to be able to, but because where he is now is completely COVID free, they're extra concerned.
Of course.
Because it's not just people in Derek's situations that are recovering from COVID. It's people that are all having serious operations and things that are very vulnerable. So I'm trying to sort of, I am pushing quite hard.
I'm sure you are.
But I'm also conscious of keeping everybody, including the staff, safe, because that doesn't help anybody. But that's been a really useful tool for him to be able to hear that. And I keep saying to him, we're going to go to the Maldives, which is somewhere that we've both wanted to go. And the doctor did say to me, maybe don't buy a ticket, but it's great that you're... Let's take it a day at a time, but it's great that you're giving him that positivity. But, so it's that balance, isn't it, of being hopeful and keeping going that I think we're all facing,
Well, not on the level that you are, but I understand the point you're making. How do you convey that to the children? Again, if I'm straying into territory you're not comfortable with, then just tell me to get lost.
I've tried to be really open with them. 6 times they said they thought he might die today.
I know, I saw.
And I didn't tell them that on that day because I don't know how you manage that thought.
How do you manage it?
As a child, really? I think it's too unsafe. But apart from that, I have been really honest and said, we don't know. He seems to be doing well. We don't know, when he can get better. But we know he's trying. He's really trying.
And do they join in on the FaceTime?
They do, and they do it in very different ways. Billy would just say what he's been up to, and I love you. But Darcy's taken to sort of doing things while there. So she'll be sort of like tidying up her bedroom and saying, this is really annoying, Dad. I've told you for ages I need more wardrobe. And she'll just talk to him as if it's normal, which I think has got to be a good thing. It's got to be a good thing. She built this chest of drawers that they were going to build together, and she said, I'm just going to do it myself. I need it because we'd been sitting there from IKEA for weeks, and she was sort of saying, Mum is so useless. She doesn't even know what a Phillips screwdriver is. You need to get better, Dad. And
so
I just think,
as if he was in the room.
As if he was in the room,
okay.
yeah. And I think, well done you, because it's very hard, and actually. But that's got to be good for him to hear that familiar sound, hasn't it?
It must do. And it presumably helps her as well, just to...
I think it does,
It doesn't sound a semblance of normality,
yes.
a conversation in your own head, but also outside your own head.
And because you know Derek very well, don't you, as well? I think the last time we were all together, was it?
Just before. I was trying to work this out the other day at the theatre at the South Bank for that big festival.
Yeah. And you know what he's like, and he and Darcy had a great relationship where they would absolutely butt heads. Billy and I are a bit different, but you can well imagine what that's like. She's like a mini Derek.
I have an inkling.
And on the Father's Day card, Billy just put, love you, Dad, you're the best dad in the world. And Darcy said, you need to get better soon, Dad, because I'm getting clever every day, and if you don't get better soon, you'll never win an argument again. I just thought, this has got to be good. This has got to be good for him to hear this,
Absolutely.
It's got to be good. We've got to stay positive, haven't we?
Yes, but how do you? I mean, you talk about the children, you talk about Derek. Your conversation is obviously utterly devoted to this at the moment. But how do you look after yourself? How do you...
I'm not sure I'm doing it terribly well, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to sort of put things into compartments. So do this for Derek. Make sure this. I've been doing a lot of research, obviously.
Yes.
We were both journalists. It's an instinct to try and find out as much as possible. But I do get, and then obviously do everything for the children. And I do get moments of being gripped with fear because, I miss him.
Yes.
And you try and stay positive. So I think it is trying to, funny enough, just before all of this, I had started to write a book about sort of, well-being and mindfulness called Good Morning Life, How to Wake Up Every Day and Smile.
Gosh.
And goodness me, is this not challenging my methods? It literally was called that, and it is called that. So I've actually been trying some of the things that I was exploring in that, which is that kind of totally focusing on the moment. Sometimes when you're gripped with fear, it's all you can do to just think about the taste of something in your mouth.
Yes.
And that focusing on the taste just stops the adrenaline and your mind for a second. And you can't then perhaps quite elevate yourself to joy, because I think that's probably a big leap, but you can sort of get a little bit of peace and think, okay, what is the thing I need to do next, and move to that. Sorry, that probably sounds a bit depressing, but
No, it doesn't sound remotely depressing. You're talking about emptying your head, and because of what's in your head at the moment is so much more harrowing and traumatic than what's in most of our heads. The practice of being able to empty it is transferable, hopefully.
Yes.
Will you stay with us for a little longer?
Yes, I will if you.
Just I know that you're getting.
So lovely to be here.
Is it like riding a bike now that you're back in the studio?
Well,
does it?
I don't know. I don't do what you do.
And Kate Garraway has joined us to discuss her husband Derek's ongoing COVID-19 treatment, which it's fair to say as treatments go, his has been as harrowing and as severe as it gets, and on it goes. So I thought we'd go back to the beginning, and I know that you would be asking whether you could have done things differently, and whether, and I know in your heart of hearts you'll know that you couldn't have done, because everything was so up in the air, everything was so fluid and uncertain. But just for the benefit of people who haven't been exposed to the level of infection that your family has, how did it start? What was the first warning sign?
Well, it sort of came from nowhere in a way, because he had been at home, homeschooling. It was in the week running up to lockdown. And so the lockdown had begun. He'd had a week of schools not being there. And so he wasn't really going anywhere, and he was fine. But he had for weeks and weeks and weeks a painful shoulder. And he started saying, I just feel so unwell. I think it's these new painkillers that I'm taking. I think they're making me feel quite sick. I think I might be getting sinusitis. And at that point, sinusitis wasn't considered a symptom. And I remember, ringing the doctor and saying this, and they said, oh, no, that's fine. Has he got a cough? Has he got a temperature? And I said no, although it's only me that's taken the temperature, but he didn't look like he had a temperature either. Sure. And then suddenly I came home from Smooth, and I said to him, you do not look right. You just look grey. I don't know what's going on. He said, I've got such a bad headache and my whole body aches. And I said, I'm going to ring someone and try 911. Tried our doctors, which were closed actually and couldn't get through. So then did what anyone who's worked in breakfast television does, is ring Dr. Hilary Jones. So I rang Dr. Hilary Jones, and he said, let him put me on the phone. And he did some sort of timing test for breathing. And I kept saying to him, is your chest tight? Do you feel like you can't breathe? And he said, no, it doesn't feel tight. It's just in my head. But he just said, I think you need to call an ambulance. I think he seems like he can't hold his breath for long enough. Gosh. So
even though he hadn't clocked that himself, because he hadn't, it took Dr. Hilary doing the counting.
He wasn't coughing. He just felt, he held it, how long he could hold his breath. So he didn't feel like there was no wheezing or anything.
Sure.
So it was all very asymptomatic. And even when I called the ambulance, I sort of tidied up the hall.
Yes.
Because I thought, oh gosh, the ambulance is coming, better tidy the hall. I wasn't in a drowning moment,
Yes, I do.
And it's only when the ambulance arrived, obviously in their full hazmat. And I actually thought, gosh, there's probably people that are really ill with COVID, and I can't believe I'm disturbing the ambulance in a very sort of British way.
I was about to say, that's about as British as
but
it
it was
gets.
It was so busy. Dear. That was the weekend when we were all told, don't do anything, don't, even if you've got a broken leg, try and avoid disturbing the doctors who are dealing with serious consequences. Anyway, they came and said, oh no, they did blood tests and said we need to go to hospital now. And so he got in the ambulance and off he went. But even for the first week or so, it all looked relatively positive in the sense that obviously it was terrifying, because we were terrified and worried out of our wits, but he was still able to text and was sending texts saying, oh, they say that the x-ray looks hopeful and all of this. So we were sort of still in a good place, and then it just suddenly went wham. And they said, we need to induce him a coma now. And then they said, we're going to have to transfer him. And then they rang and said, we're not sure he's going to be well enough to be transferred. And it was just...
Are we talking about hours? It just went from...
overnight, basically. So from the night before to him saying, I'm going to try and get some sleep, to a phone call the next morning saying, we're putting him into a coma. And then it just escalated in the next 24 hours to he's hanging by a thread. He's hanging by a thread. And since then, it's been weeks of thinking some things are improving and then some things don't. And what I think we've all learnt as a country, and certainly the medical profession has learnt, is that this isn't just a lung disease. This is a virus that attacks every cell in the body, or can do. And I don't want to scare people, because some people get it and it's very mild, but it's not something you mess about with, because Derek had no underlying conditions. He was a bit chubby, let's be honest, and I loved him for it.
I may have seen him scarfing a muffin back in February at that event.
He's not chubby now, so that's he's lost a huge amount of weight.
Of course he has.
But so I think there have been reports at various points, haven't there, about that?
Yes,
but not clinically obese or anything, So there's no reason why, and yet he remains, for the medical profession that have treated him, which are now running into hundreds with all the various shifts, maybe more, they say he's the sickest person they've ever treated. They can't believe it.
And they don't know why.
They don't know why yet. I'm sure they will know why. But it's because of the way it's affected him. So he hasn't got the coronavirus now. He hasn't got COVID. He's clear of it. What he's dealing with is the damage. And I think this is what we're going to see more of increasingly, hopefully.
Of course.
Not to the degree of Derek's. I think there's one other person in the UK that's been almost as severely affected.
How do you process that, Kate? How do you process the sheer bloody unfairness of what you've just described?
It's a very, very good question, because I do have moments of, why?
Of course.
But then, you think he's lived, and there are thousands of families. I don't want to cry, but there are thousands of families who've had the worst news, aren't there? And I haven't, I have the hope of that. So, why them?
Yeah.
Why the nurses that have gone in to treat people, the medical professionals that have lost their lives, But you're right, it's mercifully unfair. It's mercifully unfair,
Just is,
but
isn't it?
It just is for everyone,
It just is.
It's for the people that are, suffering with mental health because of it's all of it. It's just really unfair.
He left you a note, I think, before he went into the coma.
So there are two things that happened. He left an actual note in a suitcase because I'd had to go away overnight just before he got sick, just saying, this is going to be our year. And you're doing so brilliantly. I know. And I saw it at the time, obviously, and then refound it when I had to pack some things to take in for him, because they've allowed us to take him pictures and so that he can have near him to sort of, and iPad and things like that. But when he was going into the coma, it's a complicated message in hindsight, because he was actually really wanting to go into the coma because he was finding it so hard to breathe. He felt like he was suffocating. So he was texting me saying, persuade them you're good at this. Persuade them to put them into a coma. Talk to them. There's nobody more persuasive than Derek, but I don't know what he thought I could do. But also I was saying, listen, I am, but they're saying it's better for you not to. So, you have to stick with it. But we're talking to them all the time, and the doctors are saying to me, if we can keep his lungs working on their own, that's better. So it was a balance between the exhaustion and... anyway, they rang and they said, he's with me now. We've got to put him into a coma now. He's on speakerphone. You can talk to him. And he shouted, I love you. You saved my life. Thank you.
What did he mean?
Well, I thought, first of all, he meant... and I said, it wasn't me. They're doing it for them. And he said, no, I don't just mean now. I mean, you saved my life, the children, the family, everything. It's everything. I'm sorry I've got to leave you, but... it'll just be for 3 to 5 days, which is more than 100 days ago.
You did save his life, I think.
Well, I don't know. I think his family and
knew
family
him a bit
life
back in the day, but when you got together, a lot of people were very surprised, weren't they? There was a bit of a chalk and cheese thing going on, but it is...
I think to people that didn't know us,
yes, exactly,
we look extraordinary. I'm 5'2", he's 6'3". He's really loud, and
you can say that again.
I mean, I know I talk a lot. I can't forget. You can say that again, says James. Having been on the wrong side.
Pot kettle.
I know, and I'm not quiet. I can't pretend to be that. I'm not a mouse. But yeah, we did seem very different. And he's like so proud of being from Lancashire. He's kind of professionally northern. And I'm such a sort of little home counties girl. So it does look like an extraordinary mix. But then as soon as you got to know us, we're actually very similar. His family, who have been amazing throughout this as well. And obviously in bits, son and brother.
Of course.
And have been so lovely. And of course for them, they can't visit. They can't do anything. It's so hard. So, he's always been a homeboy, really, and that's been his greatest pleasure. You might tell of other stories.
No, on the contrary. I think it is. It's a proper love story. That's no doubt one of the things that sustained you and kept you strong during this incredible period. And you don't need me to tell you how much love has come in via the various social media channels and text messages, Kate, but everyone's rooting for Derek and everyone's rooting for you as well.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and we've just got to all together, haven't we, stand together and work our way out of this maze.
Yes. Finally, do you have any thoughts on people behaving in not knowing whether to, would you encourage everybody to wear a mask, for example, or do you, have you not gone there? Yes, it really is, and I'm not expecting you to proselytise. Like,
personally for me, well, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being very cautious, and I don't want to be a risk to anyone, because I feel like I've got enough responsibility on my shoulders. I don't want to be a risk to anyone, so I'm being very cautious. When you get to the children, I'm trying to strike a balance between fear and having a future. and having a sense of it. So in terms of a mask, I am wearing it sometimes. I'm wearing it if I feel that it would be a good idea to. I understand people that just feel they have got to get out and go to pubs and, and go to crowded places because those businesses need it. And actually for them, it might be a moment of sanity and normality. But I haven't felt ready to do that yet myself, But right. I think we've just got to all work out our own way, haven't we?
Yes, probably. And that's...
I hope so. Sorry, that's not much help to you, James, is it really? But,
you're not here to help me. I'm
big enough to help myself.
Well, I don't, Well.
But yeah, I think, we've all got to make our own call. All I would say is don't catch it if you can.
Yeah, be
careful.
But
also, be careful. But also, life is, Derek would say more than anyone, life is about living and laughing. So, you've got to have a bit of that too.
Well, let's hope he's back living and laughing with you soon.
Let's hope so.
Kate Garraway, thank you so much.
Thank you.